Before you proceed, I just want to bring something to Mr. Agrizzi's attention. That is that at page 156 of Exhibit S1, the bundle that we have been using this morning, I think that's a text document. You are reflected, your job title is reflected as Chief Operating Officer. I think when I asked you a question, you said in your business cards, it was reflected as marketing coordinator or something. Are you aware of what's reflected there?
I am. I thought you were referring to when I joined Diambo.
Oh, okay. Well, I may have.
Sure, it's online, huh?
But when you left,
Sure.
You were COO, Chief Operations Officer, or Chief Operating Officer. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Even now. Yeah. I'm online.
Yes, you may proceed, Mr.
Thank you, Chair.
Torres.
When we adjourned, Mr. Agrizzi, we were at paragraph 7.4 of your affidavit, and we mentioned the name of the company secretary responsible for the structuring of the company is Tony Perry,
Correct.
or perhaps better put, responsible for the implementation of decisions concerning the restructuring of the company or the structuring of the company.
Correct.
Right. Now, you say in paragraph 7.5 that from time to time you received reports regarding the names of various people involved within the Bosasa group of companies and various people in government with whom the Bosasa group of companies would have dealt. And you mentioned there the names in paragraph 7.5 of Gavin Watson and Siopela. Firstly, who is Mr. Siopela?
Mr. Siopela was a consultant to Gavin Watson personally. His background, I've been told, he was a bodyguard for the late stalwart Peter Bukaba. And Mr. Siopela was, I know, involved, he told me, with Vana Tlongwana and the arms deal. And he was also involved, he told me, with Talenti Mieni in Praza. That's what I know about Mr. Siopela.
What did he tell you about arms deal? I didn't hear that part.
Sorry, he told me he was involved with Mr. Vana Tlongwana at the arms deal.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Firstly, did these two people mention to you the names of people who were shareholders in the various companies in the Bosasa group of companies?
There were names mentioned from time to time, different names of different politicians that would come up. And this was many years ago, just when we changed the name from Diambo to Bosasa.
I presume you can remember some names,
Yes.
but not all.
No.
Can you remember precisely the context in which the names were mentioned? In other words, whether were they shareholders or associates or any other detail?
Whenever Mr. Watson would be questioned as to the veracity of a BE company, he would then rattle off names such as Gurli Pikoli, Lindy Sisulu, Nosaviwe Mapisa Ngakula. I can't remember all of them right now.
All right. My concern at this stage, before you mention names, is to understand whether the evidence that you would give is reliable and accurate. Can you vouch for any names in relation to what you were told as regards shareholdings or directorships within the Bosasa group of companies?
Are you asking me, sorry, Mr. Chair, are you asking me if I know they were factual shareholders in the Bosasa group?
Yes, I'm asking you whether, if you mention any names of those persons related to you by Watson and Siapela, whether that is reliable information which you are happy to present to the Commission.
They told me about it, but I cannot vouch for their word. I can only refer to the shareholders register and to the SIPSI documents that are there.
Well, that will be up to the investigators to produce.
Correct.
You don't have those documents at hand now.
I don't have them now.
But apart from what appears in official documents, what you would have been told would have been hearsay evidence for which you can't vouch.
Correct.
And you are not, as I understand it, clear on your recall of exactly what was told to you.
The names were mentioned to me, but I cannot vouch for them.
So for that reason, I'm not going to ask you to put up any names of shareholders and directors in the Bosasa group of companies, but if necessary and if it becomes relevant later, you are happy to do so to the best of your ability.
Oh, of course I would.
Perhaps what you could do is give it some thought overnight and record what you are happy is reliable information.
I'd prefer to do that.
All right. In paragraph 7.6, you talk about Maritime Hostels changing its name to Diambu Operations. We've heard that evidence.
Correct.
In paragraph 7.7, you go on to talk about Gavin Watson's involvement in the day-to-day running of the company, as you put it. Would you tell the chair what the position was in that regard?
Well, Chair, initially Gavin Watson was not actively involved in the day-to-day management and running of the company. That responsibility was given to Mansell. When I started, within a couple of months, he'd take more ownership of it, but at that stage, he was only coming in once or twice per week. He was also a casino license consultant to Sun International, and when his contract ended with Sun International, he became more actively involved with the running of Diambu Operations those years. So this was during 1999.
In paragraph 7.7, you say initially Gavin Watson was not actively involved in the day-to-day running of the company. What company are you referring to there?
I'm referring to Diambu Operations.
Do you recall who the shareholders were of Diambu Operations at the time you were employed?
The shareholders were Gavin Watson 50% and Danny Mansell 50%.
When did the name of Diambu Operations change? And I believe from your evidence it changed to Bosasa Operations Pty Limited.
Correct. It's changed in about 1999-2000, Chair, and that was when we got new contracts into the company at that stage. And the decision was to rebrand it, as there was some negativity regarding Diambu, so that's when the name changed.
The shareholding that you have just given relates to when you were appointed right at the beginning.
That's correct.
Okay.
The contracts that you refer to, can you specify them?
Yes, these were the Lebanon contract, the Lebanon gold mine, Kloof gold mine. There was at the stage some other smaller operational mines that we'd become involved with, like Sasol and that type of thing.
And from 2001 December, where was the head office of the Bosasa group of companies located?
It was located at we called it number 1 Windsor Road, but there's actually no number there. So, Chair, what we did was we actually took over the old Goldfield Security head office, and we called it 1 Windsor Road in Leipertsvlei.
Okay. That's near Krugersdorp.
Correct.
What was the relationship, or the quality of the relationship rather, between Mansell and Watson?
It had degenerated, and it was a bit acrimonious at one stage.
And did that result in a transfer of shares?
That's correct.
What was that transfer?
Danny Mansell sold his shares, and those shares were then used to divide it up into the
Sorry,
new...
before you go on, sold his shares to whom?
Well, he sold them to Gavin Watson.
Right. And you say those shares would?
They were then divided up and put into various smaller little entities and that. That's how Gavin decided to structure the company.
What do you know or understand the purpose of that
Well, it's to front, isn't it?
allocation of shares?
Yes.
What was
Basically,
the
it's
purpose?
to front.
In what fashion or in what manner or for what purpose?
The fashion and the manner and the purpose is to front for BE status.
Did Mansell ever return
Yes,
to
he
the
did.
Bosasa fold?
Yes, he did.
In what capacity?
Came back as a consultant to assist Gavin Watson, and I'll carry on further with it in the statement.
Yes, we will talk later of Mansell, Danny Mansell, and your dealings with him.
That's fine.
During the first 4 years of your employment at Bosasa, what was the main business of Bosasa or Diambu?
Well, you will recall that I mentioned that we did a catering services chair, full facilities management of mining hostels, as well as we had the Lindela repatriation facility and then youth development facilities as well, and services we provided to the Department of Social Services. But then also we were involved with certain smaller security contracts, if I recall correctly.
All right. Before you go on, what is a full facilities management service contract?
A full facilities management service contract is managing the facilities, and I would identify it as saying high density accommodation facilities. So your typical mining hostels, that type of facility. So you would do everything from catering, cleaning, from room allocations, maintenance, painting, to even recreation and running the bars and canteens.
Right. And what did catering services involve at that time?
Catering services were providing a good, well-balanced cooked meal.
Would that involve purchasing the foodstuffs,
Correct.
preparing, and presenting?
Correct. Cooking, preparing, presenting, and then also the waste disposal and everything that goes with it.
You refer here to Lindela, and you've told the chair what that was all about. And then you talk about youth centres of the Department of Social Services. Are those the youth development centres that you referred to earlier in your evidence, or are they something different?
The youth development centres are what it says earlier, that they take youth that are currently awaiting trial. We get, at that stage, Bosasa Youth Development Centres was getting paid to house, accommodate, clean, feed, and train children.
The services to the youth centres, as referred to in this paragraph, is that the same thing, or is that something different?
It's exactly
You use the
this.
phrase here, youth centres, as opposed to youth development centres. Simple question, is that the same thing?
Same thing.
Okay. Then you say in paragraph 8.2 that during the period 2001 to 2003, Bosasa entered into a number of agreements with, you say amongst others, the following entities. Would you relate that, please, to the chair?
Chair, the new contracts that we had received, there was a massive growth spurt that we had there from 2001. One of the contracts was Sasol South Africa. We had Brunsspruit and Twist Drive where we were running catering services. We had a full facilities contract with Kloof and Lebanon Mines, which was operated by Goldfields. We received a contract with Hartbeesfontein Gold Mine, which entailed 3 hostels. We had a full facilities...
Sorry, was that full facilities and catering?
Correct.
Yes.
We had a full facilities and catering facility with Randfontein Estates in Randfontein. Then we had a full facilities contract with Harmony Gold Mines in the Free State. We also had a catering-only contract with Goedehoop Collieries in Witbank. We had a catering contract with Oryx and Beatrix mines in the Free State, which are also part of the Goldfields Group. Then we also ventured into the South African Post Office to perform security services for the South African Post Office, and we also had a guarding agreement with the airports company at OR Tambo International, and that was to guard the multi-story parkades.
All right. In relation to the agreement with the South African Post Office to provide security, where was the security to be provided? Nationally, locally, at the head office?
It was,
Where?
Chair, it was locally concentrated, but it evolved to include pension payout points at a later stage.
Right. And by locally, do you mean at post offices in the Johannesburg area, or what do you mean?
Well, in the Gauteng area, predominantly at that stage.
At individual post offices?
Correct.
You've already testified to the activities of Gavin Watson in relation to trade union members in paragraph 9.1.
Yes.
In paragraph 9.2, you say that during late 1999, you were instructed by Gavin Watson to attend to the Sasol catering tender.
Correct.
Would you tell the chair about that, please?
Chair, when I arrived in May of 99, just clarify because I saw the mistake with the date, but when I arrived in May 99, one of the issues was that they'd submitted a proposal to Sasol Mining.
Who had submitted proposals?
At that stage, it was Diambu. And they submitted a proposal to Sasol Brunspraet and Twist Dry, but something was amiss because there was a problem with regards to their process of how they put in the tender and also how they costed the tender. One of the big issues was that they had undercosted on the overheads and they'd included it into the meal cost, and that threw out the tender completely. I was then asked to go and rectify the problem. I was told who I would meet with and who was going with me to rectify the issue.
Just before you go on, at what stage in the tender process was the error discovered, and at what stage in the tender process was the problem, as you say, rectified or intended to be rectified?
The tender had closed already. The bid submissions had lapsed.
So, as we all know, it would be improper to change the tender specifications or the specifications in the bid and the costing at that stage.
It was improper.
Yes, okay. Carry on, please.
I was then
But
asked...
I'm sorry, was the point you were making that by the time you were asked to assist with regard to the tender submission that had some error,
Yes.
the company had already lost that tender? Is that what you mean? Or it had not lost the tender as yet?
The tender submissions had...
It had not succeeded in getting the tender?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Well, let's clarify. When an invitation to bid is issued, a company wishing to tender responds by providing the documentation, costing, and other particulars required in the invitation to bid. Is that correct?
Yes.
At a later stage, then, the process is closed.
Correct.
There is a deadline put, and after that, as I understand the process, no amendments can be made to the bid documents.
That is standard practice.
Right. Now, as I understand it, at the stage you were asked to intervene, no one had been awarded the tender yet.
That's right.
But you had been alerted to the fact that there were errors in your tender documents.
Correct.
Or your bid documents.
Correct.
Right. And so after the closure of the tender process, but before the award of the bid to any particular bidder, you were intending to intervene, which
that
you
is
say
correct.
is not proper.
That is correct.
Okay. Does that clarify it, Chair?
It does. Thank you very much.
Proceed then.
Right. I was requested that I go with someone to Sasol and meet with a certain person at procurement and ask them if we could adjust our pricing structure at that stage. I was told it's not a major problem for them, and I submitted an adjusted price, where I explained in depth that there was an error in the way it was submitted. And the tender was then allowed to go through, and the contract was awarded initially to Diambu, but we had requested them to put it in the name of Bosasa because it was at the time that we were doing the name change.
In order to, as you've said to the chair, this happened after the submission date of the tender. In other words, after tenders had closed.
Correct.
In order to effect the amendments to your bid documents, did you then interact with officials at Sasol?
I said that earlier. I'd interacted with someone that was appointed from procurement.
And do you know if that procurement official, or did that procurement official say anything to you about whether she had been instructed or not to intervene?
The procurement official was actually quite annoyed, Chair, because they had been instructed from a higher authority to make the change and allow the change.
Do you know who that higher authority was?
I cannot remember the name of the person.
You then, in paragraph 9.3 of your affidavit, talk of a meeting with a Mr. Simon Mofokeng. Who is or was Simon Mofokeng?
Simon Mofokeng was the head of SAPAWU, which is the Chemical Energy, Paper, Printing, Food and Allied Workers Union.
I think it's Wood and Allied Workers Union, is it?
Yes.
And how did this meeting come about?
Well, I got a call from Gavin Watson, said that we've got to go and have a meeting with Simon Mofokeng, and he was the head of the trade union, so I had to drop whatever I was doing, and he would go through and see Simon with me.
And did he explain to you the purpose of the meeting?
He said the purpose of the meeting was to sort out Sasol
And how would that be achieved?
by putting pressure on the union.
And putting pressure on the union to do what?
But it was traditional for Diambu or Bosasa to put pressure on the union to create a work stoppage so that management was forced into submission in giving a tender.
So is your evidence then that Simon Mofokeng would be approached by Bosasa, and in particular Gavin Watson and yourself, to arrange that the trade union put pressure on the company, Sasol, in order to achieve the result of obtaining a tender for Bosasa, a
Your
tender
Chair-
award for Bosasa?
Your Chair, that is what happened.
And in this case, at this stage, we're talking about this particular tender, or was that something that happened usually in regard to tenders involving either Sasol or involving Jumbo? I just want to see whether we are just dealing with what you are saying relates, and insofar as it may relate to Mr. Mofokeng, whether you are just talking about this particular incident or whether you are saying there were many others which involved him.
The other ones did not involve Mr. Mofokeng.
Okay.
So let's just clarify. In paragraph 9.2, you talk about a particular catering tender at
Yes.
Sasol.
Yes.
You say the interaction with Mr. Mofokeng did not have anything to do with that tender. Am I correct?
What I'm trying to explain, and maybe I'm not listening properly,
Yeah,
but
no,
we had a very late night last night preparing, so my apologies for taking time. The fact of the matter is that in the Sasol tender, Mr. Mofokeng had an influence. My understanding is that the chair asked me the question, did he have any influence in any other tenders or mines. Mr.
Yes.
Mofokeng's only mine that he had influence was over Sasol.
Yeah, thank you. I understood your evidence in that way.
So the tender you're talking about in paragraph 9.2 did in fact relate to what you say in paragraph 9.3 about Simon Mofokeng.
Correct.
Thank you, I understand. My apologies, maybe my late night contributed to this.
Apology accepted.
Did Simon Mofokeng assist Gavin Watson and Bosasa in any other manner?
No.
I'm sorry, Mr. Pretorius. Maybe I missed this. Mr. Gavin Watson said to you, said there was a need for you to go and see Mr. Mofokeng. Is that right?
I was to accompany him, that's correct.
So the two of you were going to go and meet Mr. Mofokeng.
Correct.
Now, and you met him.
Yes.
What I may have missed is what transpired at that meeting.
This meeting, we discussed the pricing proposal, and I was told to just resubmit the pricing proposal as per the suggestion of the procurement official as well. Resubmit it, and we shouldn't worry.
Now, is that what Mr. Mofokeng said, namely that you shouldn't worry, or was that Mr. Watson saying that?
That was Mr. Mofokeng saying that.
So the purpose of the meeting, am I correct in understanding you to say the purpose of the meeting was to put pressure on Mr. Mofokeng, to put pressure on the company, and that you had the meeting, and the result of the meeting was that Mr. Mofokeng said, don't worry.
You're 100% right.
Thank you.
You say in your affidavit in paragraph 9.3 that Simon Mofokeng also gave information regarding Sasol pricing. You've also mentioned pricing now. What happened there?
Well, he basically informed us of what the other bidders' prices were at the meeting. So he told us what pricing structure we should look at, because the one thing about the procurement official was they wouldn't reveal the actual pricing that other companies had submitted.
That's understandable because it would be entirely improper to do so.
Correct.
And you say that what Mofokeng did was actually give you that information to allow you to adjust your price.
Yes.
Entirely improper, I understand.
You're 100% right.
Yes, okay.
Do you know how he would have come to know that information?
He had a phenomenal network at Sasol, heading up the COO union.
Okay, thank you.
Was there any other relationship between Simon Mofokeng or anyone related to Mofokeng and Diambu as it was then?
Chair, I only realized this maybe a month after the initial meeting with Simon Mofokeng, that we had employed his wife to head up a newly established training department. Her name was Maureen.
Okay, before you proceed, let me go back again one step. Did you ever come to know whether the pricing information that Mr. Mofokeng gave you was actually correct?
I presumed it was correct because we modeled our new submission using those indicators, and we were successful.
Okay. And that was against the background of you receiving information that there were problems with your tender?
Correct.
So you say in paragraph 9.4 that Diambu Operations Pty Limited was awarded the tender. That's the Sasol tender.
That's correct.
And you then say at this time, Sasol agreed to change the name of the bidder Diambu Operations to Bosasa,
Yes.
the bidder and successful tenderer.
Yes.
And that occurred, did it?
Yes, it did.
Right.
Did you get to know at any stage how the error was discovered did somebody within Jambo stroke Bosasa, after the bid documents had been submitted, go through them and discovered that there was an error, or was this information, namely that there was an error, did it come from within Sasol?
Yes, Gavin Watson got the information that there was an error in the way the pricing was done.
Thank you.
After Diambu had been awarded the tender, did you receive any instructions from Gavin Watson?
Yes, I did.
What were those instructions?
Instructions were to arrange various things. It was Bripacks, Chair, it was cold drinks, it was various grocery items, that type of thing, and they had to be delivered to Simon Mofokeng.
All right. How was this implemented? How was this arrangement implemented?
Well,
And who arranged for the implementation of this arrangement?
basically what happened was each operation had a unit leader. In this case, the unit leader was a gentleman by the name of Sidney Mantata that had worked for me previously at Malope. And he got an instruction that this is what you have to provide on a monthly basis. He would bring a purchase order to me, I would sign it off, and he would then purchase the goods according to the purchase order. He would then deliver the goods to Simon Mofokeng, wherever Simon Mofokeng wanted it. I did it exactly as I was instructed.
All right.
Was he now employed by Diambo stroke Bosasa, the person that you say previously worked for you at Malope?
Yes, he was, Sidney Matata.
Okay.
So he moved from
Yes,
who?
Malope.
From Malope
that's right.
to your company, Diambu Bosasa.
Correct.
And he was subordinate to you, in other words, he reported to you, did he?
That's right.
And Gavin Watson gave the instructions to you, and you in turn instructed Mantata.
Correct.
All right. So you say that Mantata would come to your office with a request or order. Would this specify goods? What would it specify? The order.
It was a variety of goods, cold drinks, grocery items, meat, a lot of frozen chicken, maize meal, variety of grocery goods and drinks.
What would you do then when you received this order or request?
I would just sign it off because it had been agreed between Gavin and Simon Mofokeng, so I had no reason to question it.
By sign it off, what do you mean?
I would sign the order, Chair.
You'd approve.
I'd approve it, and with the approval, he goes and gets it.
Right. So your approval would be permission to continue to execute the order,
It'll be permission to pay a bribe. Yes, Chair.
right? And how was this allocated in the books of the company, Diambu Bosasa?
With those type of amounts, they would just be absorbed as operational marketing expenses.
Right.
How regular were these requests? Was there like a pattern, like once a month, once in 6 months, or only if there is a particular occasion,
No, it was a regular occurrence.
like monthly,
Monthly.
more or less?
Monthly, normally.
And insofar as Mr. Simon Mofokeng is concerned, how long did this continue, these orders, if you are able to say?
Chair, they commenced when we received the contract, and they continued until we sold that contract. And they continued even past then, I believe.
That evidence is still to come.
Oh, okay. No, thank you.
So Mantata then comes to you with an order request. It's approved by you, by your signature. It's allocated for marketing or operational expenses. What is the practice in relation to how this matter is carried forward? What would Sidney Mantata then do?
He would basically deliver it to Simon Mofokeng. And occasionally, I would get a call thanking us from Simon Mofokeng.
The monetary value might have probably changed from 1 month to, from one order to another, but are you able to give some indication such as, well, maybe not less than so much or between that amount and that amount on average?
At the time, I would say the average would, at those years, it was about 12 to 15,000 rand.
Per month?
Per month.
More or less a month, yeah, per order. Okay, thank you.
Right, you say from time to time you would be told by Simon Mofokeng that he obviously received the goods because he thanked you.
Yes.
Did he always thank you? Or did he ever complain?
When he felt that he was being done in and he needed extra, perhaps he needed an extra couple of kilos of meat, he would phone Gavin Watson and complain incessantly. And Gavin Watson would then pick up the phone myself, and request that I attend to it and just sort out the problem.
Were there times when Gavin Watson did not receive a delivery?
Gavin Watson never ever received a delivery. We're talking about some.
Sorry,
Simon
was there
Mofokeng,
any time when Gavin Watson complained to you that a delivery had not been received by Mofokeng? My apologies.
There were a few times.
Who managed the Sasol contract?
At that stage, the contract was managed by a gentleman by the name of Daniel van Tonda and another gentleman by the name of Johan Viljoen.
Do you know whether they held any knowledge of this arrangement?
Yes, they did.
And that is the arrangement with Simon Mofokeng.
Correct.
So if the orders were roughly monthly, and at that time, maybe between 12,000 to 15,000 rand, if I heard you correctly. So they may have annually been at least not less than 100,000 rand a year.
Those years, probably yes, not today.
Thank you.
Right. In fact, you say in paragraph 9.5.6 on page 19 that each order was approximately 15,000 rand in value.
Correct.
What happened then with this contract? For how long did Bosasa hold the contract, and how did the contractual relationship between Sasol on the one hand and Bosasa terminate?
Bosasa held the contract from 99 till about 2002. And then what happened was we unbundled the Bosasa operations and we had sold off some of the catering contracts and mining contracts.
And to whom was this particular contract transferred?
They were sold to a gentleman by the name of Greg Lake and Allen, and the company's name was Equality Foods.
Right. And did anything happen after the sale of the contract?
I got a call from Greg Lake and Allen. We used to work together previously at Molope. I got a call from him one day to say that Simon Mofokeng had indicated that he wants his benefits, and he asked me if it was standard practice. I explained to him that, well, it's not the right practice, and it's not standard practice, but it's specific to Simon Mofokeng, as he had always got this undue benefit from Bosasa.
Let's move on to your evidence in relation to the South African Post Office. In paragraph 10.1, you refer to a tender being awarded to Bosasa Security Pty Limited.
Correct.
What was the work involved in this tender?
Well, the work that was involved in terms of the tender was the provision of guarding services for the South African Post Office.
And when was the tender awarded?
Sorry, when was the tender awarded?
Yes.
I would have to check my notes.
Well, you can
I
check
can't remember
paragraph
all the dates.
10.1.
Excuse me?
check paragraph 10.1 of your affidavit,
In June 2002, then why would you ask me? Sorry.
because you have to give evidence.
Sorry, Chair.
You'll understand that although your affidavit forms part of the records of the Commission,
Yes.
the evidence still has to be given orally.
Yes.
Who was responsible for the submission of this tender?
I was.
And did anything happen before the tender was awarded at the hands of Gavin Watson?
I was told to start preparing with logistical preparations far before the tender was submitted.
Right. The contract that was ultimately awarded and entered into, for what period was that?
It was originally a 3-year contract, that's standard, and then it was extended, I think, for 2 years.
In relation to the award of this tender, did Gavin Watson mention any names to you?
Yes, he did.
What were the names mentioned?
Well, the 2 names that were mentioned were Saviwe Mapisa, and the other name mentioned was, I think it's Mande is the pronunciation, Manyatsi.
The first person mentioned, is that the person referred to in paragraph 10.2.1 of your affidavit?
That is correct.
What was her position at the time?
It's a gentleman. His position was the head of security employed by the South African Post Office.
And Mr. Manyachi?
He was the CEO of the South African Post Office.
Well, I must just say, the witness just mentioned to you that it's a gentleman. I also thought it's a woman, but some names among some Xhosa names that people from KwaZulu-Natal like me view as female or male are the other way, or sometimes they apply to both. So maybe that's what happened to you.
Well,
but
thank
that's
you,
what
Chair,
happened
for
to me.
relieving me of the burden of that error.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Did Siviwe Mapisa hold shares in any company to your knowledge?
Saviwe Mapisa holds shares in a company owned by Gavin Watson's brother, Valence Watson, and the company, if I recall correctly, was Vulisango.
Vulisango being Vulisango.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Now, the evidence that you're about to give is at least partially corroborated by your own observations related in paragraph 10.5. In paragraph 10.4, you say that Gavin Watson gave you certain information about the 2 persons you've just mentioned. What was that information?
The inclination was quite simply...
Information, sorry.
The information was that he was paying them and looking after them.
What happened subsequent to that in relation to that communication by Gavin Watson?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I don't understand that.
Okay,
question.
he says, Mr. Pretorius says, you have just told me that Mr. Gavin Watson asked you to pay those 2 people, as I understand it. That is Mr. Mapisa and
Manyachi.
yeah. And he is then asking you what happened after he had asked you, that is Mr. Watson, he had asked you to pay them.
Sorry, I must just correct, Chair. I think the evidence indeed was that Gavin Watson told Mr. Agrizzi that he, Gavin Watson, was paying Mapisa and Manyachi.
Okay.
That's correct, is
that
it?
That is correct.
okay.
Now, what happened after that? Let me refer you to paragraph 10.5 and your trip to Dubai.
Okay. We went to a Dubai trade show, especially on security applications. I was looking to bring in new security solutions and systems at the stage. But we had a
When you
free
say
day.
we, who?
Myself, there was a gentleman by the name of Johnson Vovo, who was also a director of security, Johannes Gumedi, or Joe Gumedi, who was also a security director. But we had a free day after the expo, and we spent it shopping.
In Dubai.
In Dubai. So apart from buying items for family, like jewelry and that, which is ideal to buy over there, we bought a Cartier pen, Cartier cufflinks, Mont Blanc pen, Mont Blanc cufflinks, and various other gifts. I can't remember all the gifts, but there were quite a bit. We even bought some false watches and brought them back with us. But they were premium gifts, and those gifts were actually for Mr. Manyatsi and Mr. Mapisa. I can't remember the other people.
After this, did Gavin Watson tell you the fate of these gifts, to whom he'd given them or what he'd done with them?
Yes, he told me he'd given it to them, and it was confirmed because I remember meeting with Mr. Mapisa somewhere, and he thanked me for it because he really liked it.
Well, do you recall what gift or gifts were purchased for Mr. Mapisa
Got a Cartier pen and cufflinks.
and Ms. Manyache?
Yes. I remember that specifically because it was a Mont Blanc pen, and they gave a free pair of cufflinks.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Did Mr. Mapisa enjoy any other benefits at the hands of Bosasa?
Yes, Ronnie Watson's got a farm, a game farm, out in the Eastern Cape, and they would often go hunting, and they would shoot, and we'd then have to transport the meat backwards to Johannesburg.
All right. But we must understand that at the time, Mr. Mapisa was a co-shareholder in a company with Valence Watson.
The other brother, yes, Vulisangu.
Right. Can we deal then with the Airports Company of South Africa at page 21 of your affidavit?
Maybe before you get there, I hope I didn't miss this. Do you know whether or not these two persons from the post office had any influence in the tender being awarded to Bosasa?
I would think so. Being head of security and the CEO, they would have influence. One doesn't dispute.
Yeah, but what I'm asking is much more than that, not just what you think might be in terms of.
No.
Do you know any facts that
Chair, I
whether they were
earlier
part
mentioned-
of the panel, they were whatever?
Chair, I mentioned earlier that Gavin Watson had already known months before that we were being awarded the tender. And he was a personal friend with Saviwe and Mande. So I cannot prove that there were on any tender boards, but having worked for a CEO before, I know that one doesn't just lightly take an instruction, you just carry out the instruction.
Thank you.
Can we go on then, please, to deal with the Airports Company of South Africa? But before we go on, the Chair has raised an important point, because you talk in your evidence about payments. I'm afraid nodding won't be picked up on the transcript, so you should say yes or no, as the case may be.
Payments, I was told they were being taken care of and they were being paid.
But you've given evidence as to the payments to various persons who exercised positions of authority and perhaps influence in relation to the business of the entity. You've also given evidence in relation to contracts awarded or tenders awarded to Bosasa and the sometimes improper circumstances in which they were awarded. But what the chair has asked you is there any link between the payment and the award of the contract, or any direct instruction or exercise of influence that you personally know of? And I understand your answer to be you have assumed that from the circumstances.
I want to correct that, sorry. Chair, I cannot prove that they awarded contracts because they were looked after or paid. I can't assume that, I'm sorry.
Okay. Now, there will be other evidence which would tend to create that link, but we will deal with that in due course.
Correct.
But for the moment, we also know that the Special Investigations Unit did a full investigation in relation to the affairs of Bosasa.
Correct.
The results of that investigation were passed on to the National Prosecuting Authority.
That's right.
In relation to the particular contracts, the circumstances in which they were entered into, and the tender process preceding the award of the contracts, that information is contained in that SIU report. Am I correct?
In terms of corrections, right.
In terms of correctional services?
Yes.
Okay, can we go on then to deal with the Airports Company of South Africa?
Yes.
I'm sorry. The reference to correctional services confuses me. We were dealing with the post office, and we are now going to deal with the airports company. And we were dealing with two persons who occupy positions of authority in the post office. Where does the correctional services come in?
We were speaking now at a much more general level. In other words, at a general level, the evidence of Mr. Agrizzi deals with payments to various officials in various departments of government, not only the post office. It also deals with the award by various departments or various entities of contracts in dubious circumstances to Bosasa. So on the one hand, you have, generally speaking, not limited to the post office, the payment to officials and senior personnel. And on the other hand, you have dubious contracts. Between them, you raised the issue of the link. So my question was a general question relating to all the contracts and the relationships across the board.
Okay.
It is that gap that the SIU fills, but I'm informed by the SIU report fills, but I'm informed now by the witness only in respect of dealings with correctional services.
Okay, thank you.
If we may then go on, page 21 of your affidavit, Mr. Agrizzi, deals with the matters related to the Airports Company of South Africa.
Correct.
Was a tender awarded to Bosasa, a Bosasa company during 2001?
Correct.
Provide some detail, please.
Correct. We received a tender. The airports company awarded us a tender to do their multi-story car park protection services and guarding services. At that stage, they were losing on average 35 cars a month. There was a big spate of cars being stolen out of the airport. So this was
Is that at the OR Tambo Airport?
That's right. It's the multi-story.
Thank you.
Correct.
When was this contract awarded? Or
It
when
was
the
awarded in
contract
about
entered into?
2001, if I remember correctly.
And for what period of time was the resultant agreement entered into?
The agreement, from what I can recall, is a 5-year agreement, and it's renewable every 5 years. Bosasa's retained it until, I think they still have it at the moment.
Who was responsible for the submission of the tender?
I was.
And did you also compile the bid documents?
I submitted the tender bid documents, correct.
And who was responsible for their compilation? the information contained in the documents?
I was responsible for compiling it.
Did you receive any information from Gavin Watson in relation to the tender whilst you were busy drafting the documents?
Sorry, Chair, I'd just like to go back a step.
Yes, do
There's
so.
a tender bid submission, which I submitted, and I compiled and I put it together. But I did not put together the original tender questionnaire bid specifications. I just want to clarify that.
Okay.
I don't know if that clarifies the point.
You raise an important point that we should clarify
Yes.
when we talk about tenders and
Yes.
bids. The company that issues the tender, that issues the invitation to bid rather, in this case the Airports Company of South Africa, would be responsible for drawing up the specifications for the tender and
Correct.
for other documentation and decision making.
Correct.
Right. You have given evidence or will give evidence that even at that stage, Bosasa might have had some influence, and you will give that evidence in due course.
Yes.
But in relation to this particular contract, you had no dealings in relation to the compilation of the specifications and other documents in the invitation to bid.
Chair, that's what I wanted to clarify.
Yes.
All right. So when you say we were responsible for the submission of the tender, you were responsible for the response to the invitation to bid.
That's correct, Advocate.
Now, when drafting the documents that you did draft, in other words, Bosasa's bid or response to the invitation to tender, did you receive any information from Gavin Watson?
Chair, in response, I was told by Gavin Watson, and at that stage it was Mr. Johnson Vovo, that we would be awarded the tender. Gavin Watson knew a gentleman by the name of Tele Moema, who was involved and responsible for the security contract at OR Tambo and AXA.
That he was responsible for the tender at OR Tambo, does that mean he was basically the one who could decide who gets the tender or not?
I'd
Or
like
your
to believe,
understanding?
Chair, I'd like to believe that they followed a process. That's what I'd like to believe.
Okay, thank you.
Did Gavin Watson give you any other information in relation to whether Bosasa would be awarded the tender or not?
I was told to get ready because the tender would be awarded to us.
Did he mention any names of persons employed by AXA, the airports company?
Yeah, he mentioned a name of a gentleman by the name of Caesar Tanda, who was involved at the airport at that stage.
In what position or in what capacity?
As far as I recall, it was in the security capacity. Risk.
And yes, you've already mentioned, in security capacity, do you mean as a security officer or person in security management? Do you
The
recall?
management.
And Moema, Mr. Moema?
There was a division within security, I think, if I recall correctly, it was a risk division as well.
And did he occupy a managerial or a sub-managerial post?
They were both managerial positions, but I think what I need to clarify as well, Chair, is that people come up with lovely names and lovely titles, and it's all very confusing. So you have risk officers and you have all these security specialists. So I know they were busy with security, but I cannot tell you exactly what they did. Is that understood? Do you understand that, sir?
In 2009 or 2010, you say in paragraph 11.5 that the tender was reawarded to Bosasa.
Correct.
Did you have any personal involvement in regard to visits to AXA premises or OR Tambo premises?
Yes, I would visit
Tell
OR Tambo.
the chair, please, what happened.
Well, I'd often go together with Mr. Joe Gumedi, and often we would take the grey security bags filled with money and give it to certain people at OR Tambo.
All right, let's take that step by step, please. Who is or was Mr. Gumedi? I think you may have mentioned it before, but just tell the chair again, please.
I did say it was Mr. Gumedi.
Yes. What position did he hold in Bosasa?
At that stage, he was a director. I believe now he's a chairperson of Bosasa.
Right. And these visits to OR Tambo, were they coincidental visits, business visits? What were they?
Coincidental and business. Business would be discussed,
Right.
but it was business.
And you say in your affidavit at paragraph 11.5, and you've just told the chair that at OR Tambo you met with individuals.
Correct.
And you say in your affidavit from Airports Company South Africa. How do you know that?
Well, because I knew that they were clients. I was working with them. We had spoken to them on a few occasions. So we knew who we were dealing with.
And you say plastic bags were handed over. Please, the chair doesn't yet know about the process and procedure about which we will talk in due course. So would you just explain what you know and what you can tell the chair about these plastic bags?
Yeah. Chair, the plastic bags are a security bag, very similar to your standard SAPS security, what do they call it?
Evidence bag?
Evidence bags. They are serialized and they have a tamper-proof seal. In this case, however, the bags are not transparent or translucent. They are gray, so you can't actually see what is in the bag. That's what they basically are. So cash would be packed in those bags, and those bags would be taken out.
These bags, would it be bags that any security company is likely to have, or were they just peculiar to Bosasa?
I think they were a standard stock item from a security equipment sales company.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
If I may ask,
Yes.
just answer, they weren't bespoke, they weren't specially made.
Okay, thank you.
Now, you say that you observed money being handed over by Gumedi in the bags,
Correct.
but you also say that money wasn't always visible, if you just saw the bag.
I wouldn't, you know there's money inside there because you can see how money is packed.
Yes, all right. That's precisely what I wanted to ask you. You say in your statement, you initially suspected that money was handed to the various individuals in those bags. In other words, you're suggesting, as I understand it, that you didn't really know in the beginning that there was money in those bags. Is that correct?
Well, in the beginning I didn't know, but remember, I'd also received one of those bags.
I'm not following.
If you have a look at my payments right from the beginning, I also received a bag. I received a bag, so I knew what was in the bags.
So, sorry, I'm not clear. When did you receive money in a bag? Are you talking about those cash payments in the table that you spoke about earlier in your evidence?
Correct.
All right. So that payment was made to you in a bag,
That's right.
and you saw these bags. Then please explain to the chair why you say in this paragraph, I initially suspected that money was handed to the various individuals in those bags, when, as I understand it now, you knew from the beginning. I just want to clarify that.
Obviously I cannot say I saw the money, but I suspected it because I'd received money in a similar way.
Did anything confirm your suspicion later?
Yes,
What was that?
when I started doing it for them.
In other words, when you say when you started doing it for them, what do you...
When I
Say.
would have to arrange payments.
The for them in this sentence that you made is it for Bosasa, for Mr. Gavin Watson, when you started doing the payments for Bosasa to the individuals? Is that what you mean?
Correct.
Now, in paragraph 11.5, you talk about other individuals who received these bags, as you say, first on suspicion and then confirmed that there was money in these bags.
Yes.
You've said that against the background of two names you've mentioned, Messrs. Tanda and Moema.
Correct.
Were these individuals other individuals apart from those persons?
Yes, there were other individuals as well.
Can you recall? Well, when you say other individuals as well, I'm not following.
In my statement,
What did you observe? Did you observe any money being handed or any bags being handed to Messrs. Tanda and Moema?
yes, I did.
So when you say other individuals, you mean persons who received money in addition to Tanda and Moema. Is that
Correct.
How long did this practice well, first of all, was this a once-off event or did it occur more frequently than once?
That was a regular event.
Right. And for how long did this occur?
Well, it occurred until I left.
And
I'm sorry, is that in respect of the airports company?
Correct. Not, just clarity, not in terms of the individuals. When the individuals left, they
Yes.
wouldn't get anymore. But I'm talking about payments to people at the airports company was until I left.
Yes, okay. And what was the regularity of these payments in the context of the airports company? Was it more or less monthly, or was it at random, or was it when the time for the extension of the contract was approaching, or what was the regularity?
Chair, this is monthly.
Now, the two individuals that you have mentioned, would they have received those monthly payments until you left Bosasa or until they left the airports company, as far as you know?
No, those two individuals had left the airports company before I left Bosasa, so they would have been terminated.
But during the time while they remained at the airports company, the payments continued until they left.
Correct?
That's what you say.
Correct.
Okay. And the same principle applied to other individuals within airports company that were being paid as well.
Correct.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Chair.
In respect of these two individuals, do you recall having known at any one stage how much money was in the bag on a particular occasion for a particular one? Or are you able to say that although the amounts might have differed from 1 month to another, if that is the case, generally it would not have been less than X amount, or is that something that you are not able to say?
Chair, I can't comment on, because I cannot remember, and I don't want to say anything that
Yes.
would be untrue.
Okay, no, thank you.
You've told the chair, Mr. Agrizzi, that the other individuals who benefited from these deliveries in the grey security plastic bags were over and above Messrs. Tanda and Moema. Can you
Correct.
name any of these individuals?
Well, I can recall some of them, and I've alluded to them in my statement. And in my statement, it says it was Ruben Pillay, Joe Sorobe, as well as the procurement officer, Mohammed Bashir.
Now, you say they received bribes. I presume you're describing the cash payment as a bribe. In what sense do you say it is a bribe? If you could just describe why you use the word bribe.
Well, because it's unduly benefiting somebody
What purpose?
to coerce them into doing what you want them to do.
And the individuals, Messrs. Pillay, Sarobi, and Bashir, do you know this from your personal knowledge or from information that you were given by someone else?
Chair, I packed the amounts on many occasions myself, kept records of it, and on many occasions I would have to attend and hand out the packages.
Yes, no, that's fine. Let's also do this to the extent that you are able to help. In respect of, for example, the two individuals, Tanda and Moema, let's say Tanda, do you have a clear recollection that at some stage or another you did actually pack the money for that was going to her? Is it a him or her? Tanda.
Sorry, Caesar
Tanda.
Tanda is a gentleman,
Oh.
and Tena Moema is a gentleman as
Oh,
well.
okay. Do you have any recollection that in regard to Mr. Tanda, for example, there definitely was a time when you packed the cash, you put it in the bag, and maybe even delivered it yourself to him?
I cannot recall delivering it to him at all. In terms of packing it, I can't recall. I actually can't recall. I'm sorry.
Yes. Well, I'm asking because earlier on you did say that at some stage you did the deliveries yourself. So I'm just checking in regard to whom that might have happened. In regard to Mr. Moema, did that happen?
I cannot.
You can't recall.
I actually cannot recall which specific person I did it
Yes.
for. Did
Okay,
I do
no,
it?
that's fine.
Yes.
That's
Can I recall who it was? No, I can't.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just wanted to know whether you are able to remember specifics in that regard or whether you just remember in terms of generally that you did at some stage deliver to
Yes.
some individuals.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can I just clarify? In terms of the more recent people, as alluded to Bashir and that, yes, those I can recall packing and delivering. Those I can.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I'm sure Mr. Pretorius will deal with that in due
Because
course.
these are serious allegations, let's just put them into their proper context. The period of time during which there was some interaction between AXA officials and Bosasa began in 2001.
Correct.
And Messrs. Tanda and Moema are mentioned in relation to that time period.
Correct.
And you say that was a long time ago, which is correct.
It was 2001.
The other individuals you mention in paragraph 11.5 relate to a much later time period, 2009 or 2010.
And I recall it.
And you recall it. So in relation to that period, your evidence is at some point during these visits, 2009, 2010, we met with other individuals during which meetings grey security plastic bags were handed to them by Gumede. Right?
Correct.
Now you were asked who those other individuals were, and as I understood your evidence to be, those other individuals included Tanda and Moema and the persons on page 22. So it seems to me we have to take out of the category of other individuals Messrs. Moema and Tanda.
Correct. They were previous.
Thank you. And the other individuals, insofar as you can remember, in relation to your evidence in paragraph 11.5, were Messrs. Pillay and Sarobi, as well as Mr. Bashir.
And sorry, Chair, if I remember any more, I'll add them.
Please do.
I will do.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Pretorius, I think you said Masher, you mean Bashir?
Bashir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can we move on then to the heading on page 22 at paragraph 12, Black Book?
Before you do so, Mr. Pretorius, Mr. Agrizzi, it seems that there would have been many occasions when these payments were made to certain individuals at the airports company when you were not the one who delivered the money and you were not in the company of the person who delivered the money. So the delivery would have been done by somebody else or other people.
Yes.
Are you able to tell me who would have been doing deliveries either generally or on some of the occasions, either at the beginning or it was the same people throughout up to the end? Just give me some information there.
I can give you background to it. Normally, if somebody's involved in bribery and they do a deal, what would happen is they would get a monthly payment instead of a lump sum, or perhaps every second month they would get a monthly payment. Because that way, according to the way I was explained by superiors at the time, you then have a hold over that person. Because what happens is they get their lifestyle accustomed to that. So there were monthly payments. So to answer your question, yes, there were monthly payments, and if I wasn't around when they were delivered, they were delivered.
Yes, what I'm saying is, were there kind of standard people who used to do deliveries or not really? You know, people, maybe Mr. A, Mr. B, or Miss C from Bosasa who would normally be entrusted with delivering, or is that something that you can't remember?
No, I can remember distinctly. Chair, it would be delivered by the person that is working with that specific person.
Oh, so in a way, for each person there would be somebody that deals with that within Bosasa.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Let's deal then with your evidence as you set it out in paragraph 12, please, Mr. Agrizzi.
Sure.
You refer in paragraph 12.1 to what you call Gavin's safe.
Yes.
Please tell the chair about that.
Well, I don't understand. You want me to explain where it is, what is
Well,
in
you'll
there?
Have a look at paragraph 12.1 of your
Yes.
evidence
Yes.
and relate to
Okay.
the chair what you say in that paragraph, please.
Okay. Gavin Watson would spend a lot of time in my office, and so would every other director would spend a lot of time in my office, and normally I would be behind my desk and I had a small table and they would spend time there. So a lot of the times the directors would come in and ask Gavin for money because they need to sort this person out or that person out, or they need to literally pay bribes.
So when they asked for money,
Yes,
is that the description or the word they used?
yes.
Okay.
So Gavin would then go to what I referred to specifically, and everybody else did, as Gavin's safe. Now Gavin's safe is situated in the walk-in vault, and there are numerous walk-in vaults at Bosasa. There must be about 8.
What is a walk-in vault, just for those of us who have no security
A
experience?
walk-in vault is what you see on TV. It's got a big vault door, double thick door, and it's got walls around it with a solid concrete roof, and normally there would be shelves or something inside. That's a walk-in vault.
No windows
No windows.
and a high security metal door.
The beauty about it as well, yes, is it's impenetrable normally.
Anyway, there was this walk-in vault, you say, behind the main boardroom.
Correct. So that was Gavin's safe. And within there is other smaller safes where lots of money is kept. And he would go, people would come to my office, ask for money, and he would have to leave and come back and leave and come back. And this was done openly. I mean, people would see the grey security bags moving around the company.
All right. Let's just get this correct because there will be further evidence,
Yes, yes,
video evidence in this regard. Okay? You say that in your office, you would be talking to Gavin Watson, and often people employed by Bosasa would come in and ask for money.
correct. Well,
Gavin would then leave,
yes, he would have to go and get the money.
and he would come back with a grey security bag.
Yes.
And the money that people who came in would ask for, would it be money for all manner of purposes in relation to the operations of the company or maybe bribes? Or would it always only be bribes if they came in and asked for money?
Chair, if they wanted to buy anything else other than bribing people, they would have gone to petty cash. I had very stringent forms in place. This was for bribes.
Or so in other words, whenever they came in and asked for money and Mr. Gavin Watson went to what you referred to as Gavin Safe, you all knew this was for bribes.
Chair, if I can also add as well. You know, what people would do is they would come and say, oh no, they would come to me and they would say, I need some money because I need to buy some rulers and some pens to donate to someone. People are like, we are all the same. When I was small, I used to go to my parents and ask for 10 rand because we have to go and watch a play. It wasn't really a play, it was the tuck shop money that I actually wanted. People are like that, and we all fault. And so often people would go to Gavin and say, I need money for this, but it wasn't really for that. So that was one of the issues. But
So-
to answer your question, the money that people got from the safe was bribe money.
And the people who came to ask for money in that fashion were all Bosasa personnel, is that correct? Or would there be somebody from outside Bosasa who could also come in and make that request?
Yes, they were mostly Bosasa Directorate, Bosasa Senior Management, and other people from outside would also come and ask. You're right.
Okay. So, but one of the points you are making is that whatever they may say when they come in, they need the money for, you all knew, and probably they also knew that you knew what it was for.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
From your own knowledge, can you say whether Gavin Watson knew what the money was for?
He also knew they were for bribes.
Notwithstanding what you say that some other reason might be given for the request for cash or money.
You referred to the money as monopoly money. It's just easily disposable.
I just want to clarify. You've told the chair that
Yes.
people would come in often and
Yes.
say, I need money for what might superficially appear to be a legitimate purpose.
Correct.
Rulers and pens.
Correct.
Can you say whether Gavin Watson knew of the real reason, according to your evidence, for the request for cash?
Yes.
Good.
And the money that was kept in what you referred to as Gavin's safe, was it only for this purpose, namely for bribes, or it was also used for other things? Or is that something you would not know?
Chair, if I can answer your question very simply, is that it was there for bribes, and if it was used for something else, I did not know about it.
Okay, thank you. And for the best part of the time during which you were employed at Bosasa, would it be correct to say that for all intents and purposes, you could be seen as Mr. Gavin Watson's right-hand man? I think you mentioned something like that
Most
earlier.
definitely.
Would it be correct to take the position to be like that?
Until the day I left, yes.
So therefore, if your knowledge was that money that was kept at what you called Gavin's safe was solely used for bribery, it's highly unlikely that it was used for anything else, or part of it was used for anything else. Would that be correct?
I agree. I do know, Chair, to answer, some money was used for people's bonuses. That's it.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
All right. In paragraph 12.2, you say that what occurred in relation to Gavin's safe and people requesting money and being given money became the norm after a period of time. Do you see that?
Correct.
You were then given a particular task. What was that task?
To manage and try and record what was going in and out.
Why was it necessary to record what was going in and out?
Because you need to reconcile at the end of the day.
Were there just one or two withdrawals, plenty of withdrawals?
No, you're talking quite a few withdrawals and continuous.
Would it be possible for anyone such as yourself to remember how much went out and to whom and with what frequency?
Well, if you recorded it, yes, then you would, which is what I did, but, and I could
If
remember.
not recorded?
Sorry?
If not recorded?
No, you would just know how much money you'd given out, total, maybe.
Do you know what was used to make sure that money taken from Mr. Watson's safe at the request of whatever director reached the person for whom it was intended? Was there any mechanism that was in place to ensure that, or was this done on the basis of trust for the person that requested the money, that they would pass it on to the right person?
Chair, to answer your question, normally you wouldn't go and double check, but sometimes we used to do our little checks in the background.
Okay, thank you.
Whose responsibility was it to account for funds and to reconcile those amounts?
It was my responsibility.
Given to you by Gavin Watson?
Correct.
And that would have been from when to when, that responsibility? That responsibility was your responsibility from when to when, if you are able to remember?
Chair, I must be honest, I had a late night last night preparing, and I can't remember. I'm a bit fuzzy on that.
Okay, you might be able to assist us tomorrow on that, or
Yes,
not? Yeah.
I'll check up on it.
Okay, so I just want to look at the period. Is it 5 years or whatever? But you can tell us tomorrow. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just can't remember right now.
No, that's not a problem at all.
But are you still able to testify? You're still okay?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, I only got home at 2 o'clock this morning.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. No, I just wanted to make sure that
Sure.
you are still feeling free to be able to continue to testify for now.
No, we can continue.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Agrizzi, at the invitation of the chair, take your time. If you need a break, tell us. If my questions aren't clear, ask me to clarify, and I'll happily do so.
I will do.
You have two tasks, it seems. One is to see if you can recall any reliable information in regard to shareholding within the Bosasa group of companies,
Correct.
particularly by government-related personnel? And secondly, now, the period of time for which you held responsibilities in relation to cash withdrawals and payments.
Yeah.
Okay, if we can then move on to the evidence in paragraph 12.3, please, of your affidavit. You say there, what Gavin Watson, I presume it is, gave you certain directions in relation to what you refer to as managing the cash. What was your duty, or what were your duties?
My task was to prepare and to actually package the actual cash itself. So I was required to keep a record, which I did in a little black book. And normally I would attend to the directors, individuals that we were going to pay. I would also communicate the relevant amounts to Mr. Watson.
Before you go on, what would the directors do to justify or to give you information in relation to the intended recipients of payments?
They would motivate it.
Right. And would they give you any documentation?
Yes, sometimes they'd write a list on a piece of paper. Sometimes it might even be an SMS, and they'd motivate it like that.
And once you had received this, let's term it a request from the directors for money,
Yes.
would you then refer that to Gavin Watson,
I
or
would have
would
to
you
get
act independently?
If it was a new name or a new amount, I would have to get approval from him.
And then,
If it was an old name, as it were, or an amount that you know normally goes to that person, you would approve it yourself without having to refer to Mr. Watson?
Yeah, if there was a standard name, because we had standards per month that we'd get.
Thank you.
with the record that you were required to keep of these requests, which sometimes included, you say, names of individuals who were going to be paid, would you then provide documentation to anyone else?
Sorry, can you repeat that, please?
You say that your task was to prepare and package cash.
Yes,
You were given that instruction by Gavin Watson.
correct.
Directors would come to you and say, I need cash or I need money for sometimes a named person. You would record that information.
Yes.
Okay. Did you then personally prepare and package the cash, or did you delegate that to someone else?
Well, I did delegate it. I was busy, so I would delegate that to someone else.
To whom did you delegate?
At one stage, I delegated to a gentleman by the name, one of the accountants, Jacques van Zyl.
And was this consistent, or did it vary from time to time? Did you sometimes package, sometimes delegate, or was it a consistent practice? to
No, it
delegate?
was consistent with Jacques, but then at one stage, I had to take it away.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I said at one stage, I had to change the system, but it was a consistent system.
Yes, and we'll talk about that in due course.
Okay.
Yes. Now, when you gave Jacques van Zyl an instruction to package, or to prepare and package the cash, as you term it, did you give him any information in the form of names or amounts? Or
Yeah. I think what I would do is I would code it. So if you look at the example that I use in paragraph 12.3, is I used Alfred Maikela, who was one of the clients at the mines. And the agreement was for that Alfred received 30,000 rand a month, and Alfred would be ELF 30, and the person who took it to him, his names or initials or coding or nickname would be put behind that and would be written on the bag. And I would basically give those codes out. The bags would be returned to me filled with those specific codes written on the top.
All right. So you refer in paragraph 12.3. Let's first say, You were given instruction by Gavin Watson to keep records.
Yes.
And you've told the chair why it was necessary to keep records.
Correct.
You have told the chair that you did in fact keep records.
Correct.
We have examples of those records in the bundle and as exhibits which we will produce
Yes.
in due course. Correct?
Correct.
Now, just to explain in detail to the chair the codes that you used, let's refer to paragraph 12.3 at the top of page 23 of your affidavit. You've mentioned it, but not
Yes.
in full detail. You refer there to the code ELF 30 PLC. Please describe how that code is made up to the chair.
It was made up, Chair, in my head. So ELF would mean to me Alford. And
The Alford Maitele, the recipient
correct.
of the monies,
And
or the
30,
intended recipient.
30 was what he had agreed to get paid.
And 30
Thousand.
denoted how much?
They would denote 30,000.
Right.
We never talked thousands or millions or anything like that because that would be too obvious. We spoke in hundreds and tens, and so it was 110, you know. And the 30 would denote 30,000.
And
Right.
PLC?
PLC would be the person collecting it. In that instance, it was Patrick Littler, and he was from catering, so that's why it was PLC.
When one has regard to all the codes that you may have used then,
Yes.
would this principle apply to all those codes, namely maybe the first 2 or 3 letters relate to the name of the recipient, the figure relates to the amount per month, the last 2 or 3 letters relate to the person who must deliver the money to the recipient? Was that the principle that applied more or less to all the codes?
Most of the times we'd apply that, but soon people started to realize the codes,
Oh.
and then we had to change it again. So
Okay.
it didn't apply all the time.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have any authority to decide upon who should be paid these monies and how much should be paid to them? You shake your
Chair,
head,
never.
yes,
Never.
You must say.
Chair, never. I could motivate, but I couldn't make a decision on my own.
Were you on any occasion asked by Gavin Watson for your opinion in respect of any payments?
Yes, of course. Gavin Watson would ask me, listen, should we pay this person? What do you think about that? And I would give my opinion.
And that opinion would sometimes be, I presume, positive. Yes, a person should be paid.
Sometimes.
And what were the criteria that would inform such a decision?
The most important, Chair, was, is the person going to be useful for the organization? And is the person supportive of the organization? Then yes. So it was a quid pro quo situation.
Support for an organization in this context, meaning will that person do what is necessary to get a tender for the company? Is
You
that
hit-
what it meant?
You've hit the nail on the head.
Thank you. And who would decide on the amount? Is it Mr. Gavin Watson as to who gets what?
Normally what would happen was there would be a motivation, Chair,
From who?
from the person wanting to make the payment,
That is now
the applicant. Let's call them the applicant.
the person who must give support to the company,
No, they would normally...
the
if I can-
director.
What would happen is there would be a a person in between. So let's say I had a client and I felt the client should be looked after. I would motivate what I think the client should get.
Okay.
Might motivate a little bit extra so that I can get a little bit extra myself, you know. That's what
Yeah.
we encountered numerous times as well. And they would be motivated to Gavin Watson, and I would assist in the motivation.
But the ultimate decision maker would be Mr. Watson.
Oh,
Mr.
yes,
Gavin
yeah,
Watson.
no, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry,
and
I just want to be cautious here.
Yes.
You said I might ask for a bit extra. Are you referring to what you did or what someone
No,
else
no.
might do?
No, not me personally, but sometimes people would.
Well, you're going to be cross-examined, and
Okay.
so therefore it's necessary to
Okay.
be clear. You're saying people would sometimes, I think the language in the trade is take a
Haircut.
haircut.
Haircuts.
do you know whether before the internal person makes the motivation that a particular person, recipient or future recipient, be paid a certain amount, do you know whether that would have been discussed and agreed upon with that person first, or it would vary, or you don't know?
Chair, to answer your question, 90% of the times it would have been discussed or asked of.
Thank you.
Let's return, please, Mr. Agrizzi, to the keeping of records, the task that you were required to perform.
Yes.
How were these records kept by you initially?
So initially I would use a loose piece of paper and I would actually write the amounts on in codes to facilitate the packing of it because I was very busy. And then later on, the big problem was loose pieces of pages go missing. So I kept record in various A6 books. Unfortunately, I don't have one here, but a small little black book. And
You've given one to the investigators and we will produce
yes,
it in due course.
yes, and there are pictures of it in the annexures as well. And that information on the notes would be then transferred onto these books as well. But sometimes these books went missing after they'd been submitted, and eventually more than one book would be kept in rotation. So you use one, pack one away, use one, pack one away. So you'd rotate them. So we could never actually account for every single cent that was spent. That would be impossible because you're accounting for now, and then going forward, there might be another person drawing from that specific safe. So that was the issue. The only person, though, who had access to that safe was Gavin Watson.
Would you have a recollection of what you discovered when you started with this responsibility? What you discovered as being the amount, more or less, that the company was spending per month paying bribes? It might have changed at some stage, but your first recollection of how much the company was spending in bribes per month in this way, are you able to enlighten me on that?
Yeah, I can enlighten you, Chair. Are you just talking about cash, not other favors? And
About this monthly
cash?
Yeah,
Between 4 and 6 million rand a month?
4 to 6 million rand a month.
Yes.
Okay.
But you give that evidence later, but you will also tell the chair of the relation between that amount and the turnover or profit of the company as a whole.
Yes.
And in relation to the overall profits or the overall income, even the overall turnover of the companies in
Correct.
the Bosasa Group, was it a significant proportion?
No, it's a drop in the ocean. It wasn't a big proportion, didn't stick out.
All right, let's just finish the evidence in paragraph 12.5, please. You say initially you kept this information regarding payments, recipients, and amounts on loose pages.
Correct.
You then progressed to keep these records in various A6 books.
Correct.
What survives in your possession, because we will come to this later, of these lists and books? In other words, what do you have and what have you given to the investigators?
I've given the investigators one of the books that has got the figures in it, as well as some of the lists.
And we'll come to that in due course. Were any payments made without your knowledge?
Numerous.
Well, that's a bit of a problematic question and answer. If it was made without your knowledge, you wouldn't know about it.
But what would happen is, sorry, Chair, what would happen is you would leave X amount there and you'd have an opening balance and a closing balance, and the next week you come and there's nothing been written in the book and it's just gone missing or it's just disappeared. That's why I can qualify, I said numerous payments without my knowledge, because when you start with 10 and you end up with 2, 8 have gone missing.
But the only person who had access to the safe was only one person.
That's right.
Mr. Gavin Watson.
Correct.
Yes.
Just to clarify, people would have access to the vault in which the safes were kept.
Yes.
But in relation to the safes in the vault, only Gavin Watson would have access to that safe.
Hence my response, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make clear the difference between the vault and the
safe.
safes, and that will become clear in relation
Yes.
to certain evidence we're going to show to the Chair in due course. Chair, you will note from paragraph 12.6 that we need to present some evidence to you in a different form. I don't want to be too particular at this stage, but that will take some time, not only to set up so that the witness can control the technology, but also would require a short adjournment to set it up. So may we take the adjournment now and resume tomorrow?
Yes, we may do that, but before we do that, can I ask this one question?
Yes, sir.
When you started with the responsibility of dealing with this cash and keeping records,
Yes.
if you are able to recall, just tell me more or less what you think was the lowest amount that was going to a recipient, you know, out of all the recipients that may have been there, you might be aware that the lowest monthly amount may have been 10,000 rand, 30, and maybe what the highest was, if you have some real recollection, even if it's not the exact figure, but more or less.
Chair, the lowest amount was about 5,000 rand, and that would go to an employee as a monthly bonus.
Yes, and the highest would have been more or less how
Well,
much?
to an individual,
To an individual?
about R1 million, sometimes much more.
Okay, okay, thank you very much.
Per month?
Yes.
Thank you very much. We are going to adjourn now.
Thank you, sir.
We'll resume tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. So do come back tomorrow morning. We are going to adjourn and resume tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We adjourn the proceedings.
Thank you, Chair.